So I think for our employees, what's important is they get to give feedback as well on each of these times we come together, so we can further develop how well it's going and the things they want to talk about, and that they still continue to have that choice around how they do, their heads down work, what place is perfect for that. Some people it's a hub, some people it's working from home. And we also put out these in-person times well in advance of them coming together as well, so they can manage their life around that too.
Welcome back to Connected Conversations. This is the final episode of our mini summer season to deliver some content while we make our way through this really hot summer. And I could not think of anybody better to wrap out this little mini superstar season, if you will, than somebody who I followed for a long time on LinkedIn, have consumed her content, has listened to her very strong voice in this corporate real estate industry, and who I call the people's champion. None other than Tracy Hawkins of Grammarly. Tracy, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
Pleasure's all mine. This is a long time coming. I came up to you at a conference recently. You were like, who the heck is this crazy person standing in front of me? I introduced myself to you and said how grateful I was to have somebody like you in our industry standing up for the people, leading by example, and having a strong voice. And I still stand by those opinions today after getting to know you.
Oh my goodness, that's so kind of you. That was a great meeting, actually. I love that purposeful intent over in LA. And I was really happy to actually get to meet you. I'd heard a lot from Christina, who's been on your podcast. Yeah. And read everything you put out there on LinkedIn. And I think we have a lot of shared ideas and opinions. And, I think it's just about being authentic and being true to yourself and all of that. So, yeah, thanks for having me today.
Yeah, my pleasure. You're a very authentic person. And funny story is, for all those years that I followed you, you didn't do a lot of media. You didn't do a lot of multimedia stuff. I had no idea you were British. I had no idea you were British. And then I saw something and I was like, and we'll get into that in a little bit because we have a lot in common in terms of that, in terms of our backgrounds. But for those of us watching this who may not know your story, your background, can you please give us an update on where you come from, how you ended up in this industry, and where you are today, because you recently made a change and you're at a very exciting company, Grammarly. It's doing very well right now. We'd love to hear all about that. So just give us your background, Tracy.
Sure. Well, of course, corporate real estate was my childhood dream. Not really. I think I wanted to be like a pop singer or something like that, but grew up in a small seaside town called Southport in the northwest of England. A great place to grow up, very safe and nice, but, not a lot going on. So as soon as I could make the move to the nearest big city, I moved to Manchester, and I was a flight attendant. I was cabin crew for a while.
Word.
Yes. So, yes. So it was for a company called Britannia. They now no longer exist, but it was a great way of just learning how to interact with folks and customer service and all that good stuff. So did that for like a year and a half. And then, I was like, what else is out there? I had a friend who lived in London. And as you do in your early 20s, she called me one day and was like, you should just move to London. And so I packed up all my stuff. My brother moved me to London, and I moved into an apartment with her. I didn't have a job or anything. So went to a temp agency, found a role on a reception at a small .com. Really loved it there. That was like 2000, I think, and was just transitioned into like a more office manager type of role. And I really liked it because I got to work with everybody at this small .com, which was like 100 people. It wasn't even that big, and then the bubble burst. The timing was not the best to be an internet company. So the bubble burst, and then I was lucky. I found a job at a post-production company, which was called Telecine at the time, and is now called Deluxe Studios. It's a big Hollywood studio. And, when I took the job at Telecine, it was looking after one building. It was sound studios. something I'd never dealt with before. So I was interested in that. And in the time between taking the job and starting the job, they actually got bought by a company called Ascent Media. And on my first day, I remember my boss saying to me, you don't have one building now, you have 15 buildings across London. And there was like live broadcast studios, labs where they would do things with the film, technical things. There was theaters, there was office spaces, there was sound studios. I remember my team built a sound studio for Ridley Scott at one point. And so I was there for a good few years, learned a lot about managing multiple different types of facilities, buildings, and teams. And then while I was there, I got a cryptic call from a recruiter who basically said there's a big internet company who has an outsourced company that works with them and does all the facilities. I'm not going to tell you the name, which is kind of weird looking back. I'm not going to tell you the name of the internet company, but when you turn up, you'll know who they are and you'll have heard of them. So I was like, well, it sounds intriguing. I'd been at my other company for 5 or 6 years by then, so it was time for a move. And I remember walking down Shaftesbury Avenue, walking into the building, looking at the board with all the names of each floor. And it just said Yahoo, Yahoo, Yahoo. And I was like, oh my God, because it was like 2005. And I was like, oh my goodness, it's Yahoo, which was a huge name at the time. And I remember just walking into their space and everything was purple and cool. And I immediately wanted to work there. So I joined there as an outsource provider working for a small company called Erinaceous. And we were just looking after all the facilities management there. There was 1,000 people in the London office. And I'd been there about a year. And I remember the EU controller called me into a meeting. I was thinking, oh gosh, what's happened? And he said, we'd really love if you'd consider coming in-house and managing our European region. And I was like, oh my God, but okay, yes, let's do it. And just had an amazing time at Yahoo. I learned so much about tech and facilities and just building awesome spaces, doing everything from leasing to managing the facilities teams to designing and building out the spaces, a whole bunch of things. And was there till, I want to say 2011. Then I took my kind of career misstep. I went to Calvin Klein. I didn't love it. It was an interesting experience. I was looking after warehouses and some retail as well as stores. As well as the office spaces. But it just wasn't my type of environment. And I really, really missed tech. So one day I was sat there in my job feeling like I need to move on. This is not the type of environment for me. And I went on Twitter because I used Twitter. And so I was like, well, I wonder if Twitter's hiring. And that day they tweeted a role for an international facilities lead. So I applied for that role. And then a few weeks later, after going through lots of interviews, I was moving to Dublin. So I ended up moving to Dublin. I was there for about 18 months. And during that time, I kind of discovered that the way they designed their spaces were kind of a little bit cookie cutter. They did a great job, but they didn't feel like the local place that they were in, without being cheesy. You don't have to do the whole, we're in London, so we need a red phone box and a, black cab mural or whatever. But you want to make it feel like the place where the people are and they can be proud of it and bring people into something they feel is like culturally appropriate to them. And so we did a lot of designing new spaces, making them cool. And then our MD at the time, Dick Costello, saw what we were doing. He came over to London, really liked it, and asked me to move to the US, to San Francisco, to head up our global design and construction team. I took her like 2 seconds and was like, yes, please. And then I thought, well, I should probably chat to Grant, who was my boyfriend at the time. Luckily, Grant's always been amazing and said, if we get opportunities, we should all just grab them and just see what happens. So ended up moving over in August 2014 to San Francisco. Always loved things American growing up, movies and music and all the things. So I was very, very excited and still feel that way to be moving here. And, I was in that role looking after everything design and construction. Then because of my facilities background, took on our SF HQ, our San Francisco HQ buildings. And then after about a year and a half, I was about to go on maternity leave. And the person who was leading the team at the time left. While I was out on maternity leave, I said, hey, look, I'll be part of the interviewing because, this person's going to be my boss and kind of want to stay close to the process. And at one point, someone in our HR team was like, you should probably think about applying. And I really hadn't thought about applying. But then I thought, why not? And I did. And then I came back in March 2016 and took over leading the team and, did so many interesting projects, got to build a fantastic team. During our time there, we moved from the finance team to reporting in through the people team. And so we took on some responsibilities around M&A, sustainability. I was looking after things like Workday for a while as well, on top of growing out our leasing and transactions and facilities and workplace experience and all of that, design and construction. So we built this whole real employee experience group, really. And we were very closely aligned with the people team, but also kind of kept one foot in the finance team, all that fiscal responsibility, the money that we spend. We had great relationships across the company. And then towards the end of last year, I left Twitter, had a couple of months out, and then was able to start at Grammarly, which I absolutely love. I feel really, really lucky to be there. It's a fantastic company. I get to build a team again. We have some existing team members who are fantastic, but get to grow that team because it's a growing company. So just really excited about being there.
That's an incredible story. What an incredible, so many serendipitous moments. Let me hop on Twitter and see what they're doing. And then all of a sudden something comes your way. Or let me take a risk on this cryptic, because that's the way they used to do it back in the day. I don't think they do that as much anymore, where it's like, oh, we can't really tell you, and you got it. It was more back in our day we were coming up where it's like, why don't we think about these things? And then you show up and I have a Yahoo email, by the way. Everybody can find me at
I do too. I still have one.
Bob_99, because I opened it in 1999 when I was overseas on my study abroad program in London. I told you that story already, but one of those weird things. And then I live in Denver, and there's a picture of Denver behind me. So not to be too corny, but I'm trying to make my place feel like the place, if you will. So a couple that resonated with me there. But what an incredible story. Now, let me ask you this before we get into other topics. Do you feel like you now kind of come full circle and you get to start the process? I get kind of goosebumps saying it, where you get to start the process again, because Grammarly is a growing company. They're not They're not there yet, meaning they're not mega with massive, massive real estate footprint. But I feel like you get to start over again and do repeat something you've done already before. And it's exciting.
I agree. Yeah, it feels that way. It also feels like I get to learn from all the other experiences that I've had. And I learned such a valuable amount of information at Twitter. I got to work with great people, and I have that amazing network as well now. So, I always think that is a huge part of learning and growing, is having that network that you can always bounce ideas off. And now I get to go to Grammarly, whose motto is improve lives by improved communication, which I really, really love. Plus, they have these great values as well, which is not just a tagline on a wall. Honestly, they really do live to it, and they call them the EAGER values. And it's ethical, adaptable, gritty, empathetic, and remarkable. And they really do measure everything they do by those values. And I think when I moved companies, I remember having the conversation with someone during the interview process, and they asked me what I was looking for. And I said 50%, a team that I can grow, some great projects, and a wonderful company. And I really feel like Grammarly is a wonderful company. They help people communicate in the best way possible using AI, but retaining that, authentic voice. They're not looking to change it into a robot who speaks for you or, writes something completely for you. It's like, how can it make you the best communicator that you can be, and, really raise up your voice. And then I said, the other 50% is I just want a company that is really employee focused, as well as the product, and making that the best it can be. Obviously, it's a business, and that's super important, but also a company that really knows how to treat its employees in the right way, and just, looks after them and values them. And I really see that. I've been here 6 months now, and I really see that in how they treat their people. So I just feel very lucky to be here. Plus, there is an amazing kind of synergy between what we did at Twitter, which was like that platform for voices, giving anyone a voice, and then Grammarly, where you have the improving lives by improving communication, helping people be their best kind of authentic self, but, you know, put their best foot forward when they're communicating with others. So it's just feels like a natural progression. I get to work with a great team, and I also get to grow it. And you're right, you know, we are kind of early days. We're kind of in 6 locations. But we get to really grow that in a thoughtful way, which is really nice, especially in the economy we're in and kind of everything the world's dealing with.
Who better to do that? I mean, just based off your story and where, you know, it's just been a story of growth, right? You have one building, you get a phone call, now you got 50 buildings. Then you move on into one of the biggest tech companies in the world and help grow that portfolio. Let me ask you this again, before we move on to other topics. There's a reason why I called you the people's champ. When I think of you, I think of somebody who fights for others, right? Maybe it's servant leadership, is the best way you could put it. I see you that probably not, I've never worked for you, but I see that in the industry with you as well. Where does your moral compass come from? Where does that come from? Why do you care about others so much?
I'm not sat there thinking about it every day and being like, how can I, you know, be the people's champion or whatever it is you're saying. I definitely don't see myself that way. I just think authenticity is really important. You know, I have a 7-year-old daughter as well. So when I do things, you know, she's taking cues from what it is I'm doing. And that's important to me, that I'm putting my best self out there. I also always think when we're at work, it doesn't need to always be this super serious, you know, painful thing. It can be fun, and we can enjoy doing bold new things together. And so I think that that's an important part of the approach, just making sure that, you know, I'm exactly the same person I am at home as I am, you know, when I'm working with folks. And has
it always been that way? Because I've been able, through the pandemic and doing things like this, I've been able to, and working at the company I work for, I could be more myself. But back when I was younger, I was terrified to be myself. I wasn't allowed to go to conferences. I wasn't allowed to do speaking engagements. Was it always that way for you? Or is that something that's come on as your careers progress? Because it hasn't always been that way for me.
It's an interesting question. I think your confidence grows over time.
Yes.
Just through the experiences, right? And I think as you become more senior in places as well, you feel like you're able to speak up more. But honestly, I think I have always said what I thought, not in a rude way. I've never tried to be difficult, but I've always felt like I've spoken what they say, my truth. Sometimes I've been told not to, you know, it has happened before. But in recent years, the companies where I've worked have really seemed to value that, which is great. But I feel like you know, my dad's the same way. My family's the same way. You know, we always kind of say what we think. But I think like with Grammarly's values, the empathy piece is always really important. I'm always trying to understand as well where the other person is coming from, and like assuming good intent with people as well, and trying to find common ground. So even if I'm disagreeing or being a bit noisier about something, you know, I've always tried to come to a place of, you know, common ground or consensus with that other person. And I don't think I've ever been one of those who's just trying to put stuff out on LinkedIn to get a reaction or to cause division. And I think that's the thing that we see a little bit happening. But for me, it's just sometimes there's important conversations to be had, and sometimes there's things that we want to talk about that I just feel like maybe I've got some experience that's relevant. So, but it's not about putting myself on a pedestal or putting myself out there for any reason, you know, other than just I think it could be a good conversation.
Yeah, you know, you don't come off that way, and I'm not trying to get you to come off that way. I'll happily throw you up on the pedestal. Like I said, I followed you for years, and your authentic voice, and you're what I call an electric factory. You're somebody who has a lot of energy behind what she's saying, will stand behind what she's saying, and will happily put it out there. And for sure, that's recognized and appreciated for sure. It definitely is, Tracy, for whatever that's worth. So with all that said, let's go into kind of the little theme I've taken on for this little mini season of connected conversation. It is what's going on, right? So we went from one weird time to another weird time. And I think we're in the middle of yet another example of a weird time, as I will put it very plainly. And from your perspective, what I want to talk to you about is what is going on with the employee. What is important? What is not important? What is happening with the companies? Grammarly's thriving, but we can't say a lot of the other tech companies are thriving right now. We see the layoffs rolling in, and I know that's not the same situation at Grammarly. So let's talk about what's going on with the employee right now. I guess what from your take, and we just had a conversation offline the other day about some things that you were working on. What are you finding coming into a new company that really values employees, comes things from a position of empathy? Let's start with what's important right now.
Well, first of all, I think in 2023, we're still in this big experiment. People are trying out a lot of different things. Yep. I think what remains important is employees feeling like they have choice. We went through a period where no one was going into offices, nobody was coming together. And obviously that was one extreme and people didn't love it. But it showed us that a lot of the things that we assumed we had to be in person for, actually, maybe we don't as much. From our experience at Grammarly, when I joined, I really liked their intentional approach, and they have this remote first hybrid approach. Yep. And what that means is 2 to 4 weeks every quarter, and it depends on team as well. There is flexibility. Folks come together in person for a very curated, intentional week of programming together. And then the rest of the time, they can choose to come into a hub. That's what we call our offices, or they can work from home, and they can flex that need from week to week as well. And so when we look at what's important to our employees, it remains that element of choice, but it also, I think, is when they come together, it was worth them being there in person, that the time they spent together is very carefully thought through and curated, and they can get to the end of that week or few days that they've been together and they can say, it was totally worth me getting on a plane or getting in a car to come together. And the sort of things that we do when we bring people in person is, updates on where we are as a business, team bonding, social, learning and development. And, we're looking at kind of what can we do from a philanthropic point of view as well to support that local community too. So I think for our employees, what's important is they get to give feedback as well on each of these times we come together, so we can further develop how well it's going and the things they want to talk about, and that they still continue to have that choice around how they do, their heads down work, what place is perfect for that. Some people it's a hub, some people it's working from home. And we also put out these in-person times well in advance of them coming together as well, so they can manage their life around that too.
So one thing you said to me when we were talking offline was that you all as a leadership team, you developed the plan for when you're going to ask folks to come in. It's you develop it some ways out so that people can plan for it, but also you're communicating the why.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's not happening in other places. I can't quote any stats. I can't give you any specifics, but it really resonated to me with what you were saying is we tell them the why. And then by the time they're done, it sounds like you do the survey. Yeah. Did we accomplish what we intended with this time? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, exactly. It's exactly right. So, as we're bringing different teams together, and it can be, depending on your role, you might be part of a smaller functional team that comes together, then part of a bigger org that comes together. And then it might be for a role like mine. If you're a director and above, then you might have an alignment week that you attend with, senior folks across the company. And after each of these gatherings together, we're soliciting feedback. We also have our check-ins. I think it's twice a year where we do the employee check-ins to see how folks are feeling about coming together in person and what they enjoy about that. And I just think it's really important to have those check-ins that are really quick after folks coming together and when it's fresh in their mind as well. We also work really closely with the stakeholders to do the programming. We're not just kind of cookie cutter putting out the same thing each time. It's like, how do we evolve it? How do we make sure that it's useful and relevant to folks? How is it solving issues that we need to solve, or how does it ladder up to our objectives and goals? And so it's just making sure that it's relevant to what folks are working on as well. But it's staying very close to the stakeholders and working really closely with the leaders of the teams.
If anybody gets anything out of this podcast, I hope that's what they get from it, because communicating the why and then helping people plan down the road, saying, I think you told me you were planning for next year already.
Yeah. So we're in that process right now where we're looking at the bigger org get-togethers for the next year so that we can send that out to folks. Obviously, there has to be a degree of flexibility because you don't know what business challenges are going to come up and things that may change. And so smaller teams may get together, with kind of less advance notice, but it's still a case of making sure that when you're bringing teams together that everyone can attend and that it's useful to everybody.
That's amazing. And that's where your experience comes into play, right? It sounds like coming in with a plan. And again, I feel like this is lacking for those for those companies where the employees, there's some discontent. There is the word I would use. Mm-hmm. They're probably not being communicated to, and they're probably not given a plan as to why any of this. It's just random. It's like 2 days a week you come in, or Tuesdays and Thursdays, office days. It just seems like it's kind of like throwing something against the wall and seeing like it sticks. So one of the things that I'm real interested in is when you look at the environment right now, and there's companies that are downsizing. Not all companies are as fortunate as Grammarly, as we talked about, where you're hiring, you're growing. Mm-hmm. For those that are downsizing, employees out there who went through the pandemic, work from home, liked it, liked the flexibility, but at the same time, maybe looking for a job, right? Mm-hmm. How do you balance as a leader and maybe as somebody's expectations as an employee, where it's like, maybe you can't, this is my way of saying it, maybe you can't have everything you want, but at least you have a job with benefits and you're working. So how do you balance that? I think you had some good takes on that from a recruiting approach that we talked about previously, but how do you balance that to where it's like somebody may be thinking they're going to get more than really what a company is willing to offer in terms of the working models?
I think it comes down to clear communication at the start. I worked with our recruitment team, who are amazing and very busy, to talk about our remote first hybrid approach. And our previous CEO, Brad, he put out a blog about our remote first hybrid approach. And, that might not be for everybody who looks at a job at Grammarly, but they might not love that idea. They might want to be fully remote, which is fine because there are plenty of places that are fully remote. And I think we are very upfront about our approach and why we do our, very curated in-person time and then the rest of the time hybrid. I think we're very upfront about that with candidates. And I think that's the fair way to do it, and to be able to put out your value proposition. And this is why we take this approach, so that when folks are coming to you for a job and assessing different opportunities, then they know what they're in for when they join. And so I think we're very, very clear about it, and we manage folks' expectations before they join. I know it was made clear to me before I started the role, I really understood it. And when we look at our kind of feedback from our employees, it's something that they really appreciate. They really appreciate that in-person time being thoughtful, and then the rest of the time being able to choose. And also we welcome the feedback, right? We know that the way we do it isn't ever going to be 100% wrapped up with a bow. This will evolve, just how everything we're looking at with future of work is evolving. And we really value people's feedback. We heard from them when we started bringing them together. We were like, wow, we've got everybody in person. We need to just pack out the programming and get so many valuable experiences in there. And we got feedback that, people were feeling overwhelmed and they couldn't stay on top of their work, especially folks that traveled in. And so we built in focus time, and we built in free time for people to be able to choose oh, I need to meet with this person or that person and solve this particular issue in person. And so we continue to evolve the approach, but I think it's just very important to have a clear approach to how you collaborate and work together as a company so that folks coming in really understand that.
And then do you look for, at that level, taking it up to the level of, that looking for the right candidate? Are you looking for people who fit the culture? Are you looking for people who may add to the culture? A little bit of both, or how do you approach that?
I mean, so recruitment isn't, I'm not in charge of recruitment, but what I would say is a grammarian, that's what we call our employees. Diversity is important. Diversity of thought is really important, and background, and Grammarly wants to be a tool for everybody in the world to use. And so our team needs to be reflective of that, of how we think and how we recruit. And so, we're always looking for folks who are going to add to the culture. I think culture is always evolving as well and always changing. And so you can't be fixed about it. I don't want to work with people who think and look like me. I want to work with a very diverse team so that we can think of all of the gaps and all of the areas that we need to cover and be aware of and can grow ourselves as a team. I think there are stats out there that says, diverse teams win more and they do better. And to me, it makes total sense. So, I can't give the official, this is how we approach it as a company, but this is what I see as an employee.
Well, obviously, just based off what you took us through, that makes a ton of sense. So let me ask you this. So we talked about what's important, what's not important right now. With everything that's going on, what's some of the noise? I love to hear about what people think some of the
I think when folks are looking at things like LinkedIn and looking at the opinions and things they're seeing about future of work, it's very easy to get skewed into very strong opinions around offices are dead, or the future of everything is remote, or everyone should be back in the office every single day. I just think it's like anything in life, balance and something in the middle tends to be where you land up. And I think when you're looking at LinkedIn, you just need to be really cognizant of your sources. It's like anything on the internet, who's it coming from? What's their point of view? Are they trying to sell something? There's just a little bit of critical thinking, I think, when we're out there. I think also we shouldn't really panic and rush to get to the end result, because we were in a pandemic for a number of years. It's going to take a few years for this thing to shake out. And I also think every company is different and they have to find their own rhythm. What works for other companies is going to be dictated by their goals and what they need to do. And is it a product where people need to come together in person and work on things? Or is it something you could do completely remote? It's, that's why I don't really comment on other folks' approaches, because I know what's working for me, because I'm at Grammarly and I know what they need to achieve. But other companies are different. And so I just think balance, understanding sources and where folks are coming from when they're putting things out there in the world. I know one voice that I think I go to a lot is Nick Bloom's, who's a Stanford professor. He's been doing this research since 2004. Very balanced view, and I really like what he's doing. So I'd say this is the year for not jumping to conclusions. For not thinking there's an end state or anybody has the answer. This is the year for continuing to assess and pilot, try things out, and do what's right for your business.
So one size fits all is definitely not the answer. And then there's
definitely not. There's no holy grail, Bob. There's no holy grail to this. If anybody says they've got the answer, then I just don't believe it.
It's also funny because on a previous podcast, we were talking about the media, right? The media is terribly negative. And you could read reports right now that are saying San Francisco is the apocalypse.
Right.
But then I saw an article this morning that said office space is in high demand right now because AI companies, all these. Right. So it's kind of hard. It's kind of hard to wade through it all. And that's kind of why we wanted to start this podcast and take it from an authentic standpoint and not really lean into people pushing an agenda or a product or something like that. We don't do any of that here.
Right, exactly.
I want to hear from people who have a voice and can help kind of guide us through yet another time that just seems so chaotic.
Yeah.
So with that said, that leads me to another question that just popped into my head. So as you've been there and done that, right? And you take on this new responsibility and this new role at this new company, and you think about where you've been, what would you tell the next Tracy Hawkins, the next, head of real estate, next strong voice, next female leader?
Mm-hmm.
What would you tell them?
Well, first of all, I always think just in general, listening to your gut is the right thing to do, and having your own set of principles and values that you live by that you might not always need to think about, but sometimes you'll get into a situation where you think, okay, is this something I want to do, or is it time for me to do something else? So I always think that's really, really important. The other thing that stood me in good stead is just saying yes to scary opportunities, taking on things that you might not 100% feel you're the expert in, but you know that you can help and you can grow, and that maybe you're good at building relationships. And I think relationships get you 90% of where you need to go most of the time. You can learn anything else. So I would say operating outside your comfort zone is a good thing. It's what helps you grow and learn and not get kind of stuck in one area and that becomes your thing. I've always liked to take on new things. Like at Twitter, I took on the audio visual team. We did sustainability. We did a bunch of different areas that I'd never done before. And it helped me continue to grow as a person. And then, don't listen to the naysayers. When I was at Yahoo and I was in-house, I had the opportunity to, when I was at Yahoo and I was with the outsourced service provider, I had the opportunity to go in-house. And I sat down with my boss from the service provider and said to him, look, I've had this opportunity. It seems quite interesting, exciting. Obviously, it's a bit of a stretch for me to go from like managing the London office to all of Europe and then the real estate and the leasing and learning all that side of things. But I feel like it's going to be a really interesting opportunity. And he turned around to me and said, I don't think you should do it. It's too much of a stretch. I think that you're overreaching. This is a big mistake. And in that moment, I was like, interesting response. And if it just made me want to do it more. It just really made me want to do it more. And so I think when you're put in situations where you maybe don't know everything, that's good. Who wants to do a job where they already know what they're doing? You want to be continued to learn and grow. And so I think I've always used like the naysayers as motivation to really do the job and do it well, So that would be my advice, like take on things you think are scary, try and say yes, trust your gut. I think those are important things for me, at least.
And not to work for a boss who throws a roadblock up in your face like that, because they were probably worried about their billable hours that they're about to lose.
Right. So, and I've always kept that in mind as people in my teams, I always want to set them up to do the best work they can do. And if that leads them somewhere else and it's not in my team, then I want to continue to like motivate them and be a great partner to them. And who knows, one day they might come back to your team. One day you might work for them, so why demotivate folks? I always want to be there and be supportive.
That's funny. This has kind of been a common theme over this mini season. I keep bringing up an old manager of mine, Larry Turner, who his office was always open. He loved for you to come in and just plop down in a chair across from him and ask your questions. And he was going through something with me once, and he's like, Bob, why do you always immediately, whenever I ask you to do something that's kind of hard, you throw up roadblocks all over the place? Because you throw up those roadblocks and then you go away, and 2 days later you come back in here and you tell me it's done. Why do you do that? Why not just go out and have the belief in yourself that you're going to solve this problem and you're going to make it happen? And here, that was 17, 18 years ago. And that conversation still sits in my brain every day, especially when I'm talking to somebody or talking to a younger resource. It's like, don't throw up those roadblocks, or don't let anybody gives you that kind of advice. I mean, that's not somebody you want to work for. You want somebody who's going to empower you and say, you can do it. I like what you said though, about something that's you're not 100% the expert in. it's good to swerve out of your lane a little bit. I always say stay in your lane, but it's okay to swerve a little bit so that you're still learning. What are some of the things you've learned coming into Grammarly?
So many things. I mean, we're about to take the IT team into part of our WXP, workplace experience team. I am not a huge expert on information technology, but I can lead a team, and I do know how to make folks feel motivated, and I will get up to speed on everything that they do, and help them achieve their goals and see how those intersect with our workplace experience team, which I know they do. I mean, we're a huge partner to them already. And as I think about the challenge with future of work and all the new apps that are coming out to make us more productive, regardless of where we're working, it's going to be this amazing marriage. So I've always had this come up throughout my career, you know, whether it's building out space in the Middle East where I'd never done that before and everything was completely different. I remember walking around a new space, like completely shell and core, and there was a landlord in front of me walking with a broker, and I think I was walking with one of my colleagues or another broker, and I think it was in Jordan, Oman, Jordan. And the landlord said to the broker, "Oh, you know, who's in charge? Who's the decision maker for?" I think it was Yahoo. It was Yahoo. And he turned around and said, "Oh, it's Tracy." And the landlord turned around and said, "What? That little girl?" And I just burst out laughing. We also didn't take that building, but it was a very amusing moment. And I just take those kind of incidents where people don't think you can do something as an additional motivation. It's only going to take away from you if you let it upset you and you let it demotivate you. You just need to use it as fuel to push you forward. I mean, isn't it true they use cow poop as fuel somewhere? So you can use BS as fuel to make you do better.
I want names. And I'm going to DM this podcast and be like, look at her now, guys. Look at her now.
The best thing you can do is go off and do a good job and, you know, move forward, and don't let the detractors slow you down, you know.
So let's do a little fun one while we wrap things up, and we're coming to our time here. Little fun one. So with the, you know, the platforms, the social media platforms changing around, what's your go-to now? Is it Threads or where are we at?
You know what? I've been taking a little bit of a break from there, but I love LinkedIn.
Okay.
Yeah, I've been on Threads a little bit because, you know, I stayed down with the kids. LinkedIn.
I haven't touched Threads. I never was like the one putting out stuff.
I just like new things. You know, I just like new things. So I wanted to check that out because I, you know, want to know what's happening in the world. New things. Instagram. I really like Instagram because I just love the picture, the visual aspect to it is great. And then I am also
I did too. Like when I started Instagram, I got into photography. It made me like my pictures of like landscapes and scenery. Now it's just kind of lost in the sauce. I used to love Instagram. God,
I'm a latecomer to it, so I'm kind of still liking it. But you know, I will say I'm pretty old school because I'm on Facebook, and that one's a good one because I have family in another country, and so being able to keep them up to speed on everything that's going on, it's a great mechanism for that. I would also say I want to do a little plug because Instagram is great because I'm on the board of this nonprofit called Blue Bear School of Music. And so I like to put out all the things they're doing, and they're about to open a new facility over near Spark Social in San Francisco, Mission Bay. And they're awesome because not only can you go there and do kind of paid lessons or learn to DJ, that sort of thing, the paid lessons actually sponsor a lot of the free music education they put out there for folks in low income housing and in shelters. And so they do really amazing work. So the other thing that I would give people advice on as they go through their careers is don't be all just about work. Like get out there and get involved in other things that better the community, things that better you. Blue Bear is that for me. And so is Cornet. You know, Cornet is a place that I can go. I'm on the board of Northern California Cornet and be able to give like the viewpoints of people that I'm working with and hearing every day and continue to evolve that organization. So don't just be all about work. Having other things that I think make you better at your job. And I just absolutely love being part of Blue Bear and being able to bring my real estate piece, but also the leadership things that you may have learned over time to better their mission too.
Terrific. Where can folks find Blue Bear?
You can find them on Instagram. You can say Blue Bear Music, or if you look them up, I think old school website is Blue Bear School of Music. I think it might be a .org, but if you just put in Blue Bear School of Music, you can find it. And if you go to YouTube, if you put in Blue Bear School of Music and Jack Black, you will find an awesome partnership that he did with them for their 50th birthday, because they've been around for 50 years. And they sang a David Bowie song together, and Jack Black called them the original school of rock. So they're super cool.
So here's what we're going to do. When we put this out, we're going to include those links into the description of the video so that we can provide some promotion for Blue Bear School of Music, correct?
Thank you. Yes, that's the ones.
All right. So that's our time. I want to thank you. I always finish my podcasts with gratitude. So I want to thank you very much for being a strong voice in the industry that I've been a part of for now 20 years. I want to thank you for being a leader and what I call the people's champion, because I love how you authentically approach your role and what you put out there in the world that really benefits others. And I want to thank you for spending this time today. And I really do appreciate everything that you bring to our world and everything that you've been through in your career. So thank you very much, Tracy.
Thank you. And I appreciate you because you've done a lot of like raising up women's voices and through these podcasts and everything. So I appreciate the work that you're doing and really hearing from some really interesting people. So thank you for elevating them.
Thank you for recognizing the point of this podcast. That's what we were hoping to achieve. So with that, I'm Bama Sache from Nuvolo. That's Tracy Hawkins from Grammarly. This is Connected Conversations, and I'll see you on the interwebs. Thank you very much.